running, and I've got the microphone in a slightly different position this week. So, oh good, yes, we're up and running. I can see things coming through. So, first stream in a few weeks. Firstly, apologies for that, and my voice may be a clue as to the reason why. It's not really been very possible for me to do any live streams. So, anyway, I thought tonight, back to normal, I think. OLC CodeZone, episode 39. And we're going to be doing some space thing stuff. In particular, I want to look at a production chain simulation module. Now, yes, my voice is probably going to be quite annoying for a lot of you that are used to how it normally sounds. I can do my best Barry White impression at the moment. I'm not in any pain or anything like that. It's just I've had a really nasty cold. I've not been able to get rid of it for about 2 weeks, and this is what's left over of it. So good to see that the stream is up and running, and really, well, what I've got here is we can see CodeZone has been going, right? For all those people that think, oh, we've not been doing anything, well, we're up to episode 39. And just to differentiate between the not CodeZones, I've created a different type of thumbnail. So if you've been following along with the hurdy-gurdy build, and I recommend that you do, it's been a lot of fun, they're classified as not CodeZone, but I wanted to keep the colour scheme nice and pretty. Dragon Eye, no worries, sounds great, thank you very much. Was Danny first? Who was first? No, Mugetsu was first today, sorry. Go Gruffler, hello. Oh yes, so we're going to do some hellos. We've got Mugetsu, we've got Dragon Eye, we've got Standard Int, we've got Saladin, we've got Dandestein and Gruffler so far. Excellent, good stuff. Right. So yes, production change. So in the last official episode of Space Thing, we did this rather buoyant "Let's do this," and that was a couple of weeks ago before I got sick. And in that, we started to plan out, well, how are we actually going to sort of get to the finish line of this project? And we decided it was going to be sort of a resource simulation stroke tower defense style game, and I wanted to have a think about some of the resources. So we're actually going to do some coding tonight. Last time it was all looking at stuff. If anybody knows why YouTube does little sort of preview videos like this for some videos and not for others, I'd be quite interested. It doesn't do it for all of them. It's quite selective. I like the feature, but I just don't know why it picks some videos over others. If you know why, let me know. And I was very surprised because the hurdy-gurdy builds I've only put live. I was up actually at 3 o'clock this morning. I've not been to sleep since. That actually quite a few people have watched them. Probably they've watched the first 10 seconds of it and gone, "What the hell's this?" And moved on. We've got a little rebel. Hello. First time chat from Murphy. Oh, hello. The Chazeg, hello. Alta, hello. Maybe it's a video age thing. It's a pretty new feature. I'm not so sure how new it is. First time chat from Bixie. I don't think that's a first time chat, surely. And Nullbiter. So yes, as people are coming in, probably realising I'm not sounding like I normally do, and that is the reason why we've not had code zones really for the last couple of weeks. However, tonight, code. Right, we're back to normal a little bit, and I specifically wanted to talk about the production chain. So, as usual with a lot of the space things, I sort of break it off into a little program all of its own and start to experiment with it. And I've not really got anything to show yet. In fact, if we go down to the like Pixel Game Engine instance here, there's nothing. Right, so it's empty. It doesn't do anything. So I'm thinking about the structure, and I wanted to sort of get on the OneNote and start thinking about what do all of these terms mean, and how do we move resources around in the game world, and how do we generate things. And there's a couple of guiding principles that I want to sort of encapsulate. The first is that the resources themselves are just an ID. Now, forget ECS and all that kind of things for the time being. It's just a simple ID because the resource description might actually have a lot of information. I don't want to be passing around all of this sort of duplicate information all the time. So a single instance of a resource is sufficient for this simulation. But I do want everything to be externalized. I want to be able to create probably a Lua file or some sort of external config file which defines what all the resources are and how the things that interact with resources interact with them. So for example, if we created a mine, I want it to produce resources over a set time. A factory has an input suite of resource requirements and over time outputs more resources. And resources need to be stored somewhere, so I've got this basic idea for a silo. which I'm dabbling around with some of the code here. The idea is to literally pass around the objects. It's a bit of a bonkers idea, where you're physically passing the resource around. Rather than just increasing and decreasing counts, you actually physically move resources around. So I've created these functions, deposit and withdraw, and these are meant to be somehow safe. I also didn't want to have all the silos store every possible object in the game, so they use a little unordered map. I don't know. We're going to experiment with these things and change things as we go. And we've also got these factory things. So I'm going to draw this out in OneNote, just to sort of give you an idea of how I envisage these things coming together. And for some reason I've disabled the Twitch chat, so I apologise. Christian Seiler, hello from Switzerland. I used to live in Switzerland very briefly. That's quite nice. First time chat from Bob3S. Hello. Hello world indeed. First time chat from Spark Knight. Hi from France. Yeah, I've not lived in France, but I have been to France a few times. What have we got down here? Saladin, you used to get preview for. Are we still arguing about the video? Okay, good stuff. If anyone can tell me why there's a selection, that's an important thing. Production change, time to break out the Excel. I did actually start by doing a bit of a spreadsheet for this, but quickly realised writing the code is more fun than writing a spreadsheet. But yes, we are going to have to do some tweaking and tuning of it. You sound like you got 80-100 horsepower. Possibly. Hello, advertising. Oh, okay, yes, I don't run any ad. Dragoneye, the bot, is on course there with the links. Saucy, hello, good to see you again. Chocolate Milk, hello. Herbal Dance, hi. And hello from Finland and from Denmark. Have I been to... Yes, I've been to Denmark. I've not been to Finland, though. Although I was going to go last year, but COVID put a stop to that. HP is not horsepower. Oh, I thought... Health point. Well, as a gamer, I know them as hit points, Rosso. Right? Come on. What about Germany? Yeah, I've been to Germany a couple of times. Where have I been to Germany? I've been to Stuttgart. I've been to Munich. I've been to... where was that? There was a conference exhibition not far from one of the airports. We never really saw anything other than the airport. It'll come back to me. It'll come to me. Right. So what I've got is the idea of I want to try and do some reuse. So the idea is we've got a planet somewhere which can produce resources, and we're going to have some sort of space station assembly that can produce resources too, or at least manipulate resources. Whereabouts in Switzerland? I stayed in Lausanne, which is a ski resort. I was actually there in the summer. I was at a basketball school of all things, but it wasn't to play basketball. It was to learn French. All very, very confusing, but it was good fun. So it was when I was a teenager. I went for 2 years on the trot, and we stayed each year for I think it was about 6 weeks, something like that. I really enjoyed it. Speedy, hello, good stuff. So the idea is that somewhere in all of this, or all of this, we have what is known as a plant. Now, that might seem a bit odd to the non-native English speakers, but plant is typically what we would describe as a sort of an industrial facility. It is a factory or a collection of things that produces goods or manipulates something. So the idea is that you only have one plant associated with planets, asteroids, or space stations. You don't have multiple plants. And so that's our sort of entry point into the production system. So really, it breaks down into having lots of plants sort of all talking to each other. Now, in this simulation today, the one thing I'm not particularly concerned about is getting goods from A to B. That's something we'll talk about when we start doing the actual logistics side of it, and we've started laying the foundations for that in previous videos. Won't Americans have power plants? They do. I mean, we all do. It's just some people. I always thought it was funny as a child when you saw a road sign that said "heavy plant crossing." So the idea of a plant is that they're going to contain multiple things. So the space station, for example, could contain various factories, and factories process stuff. So a plant is going to have one or more factories associated with it. So plant. has a factory. Factories. The S is very important. And a plant can also have silos. So resources need to be stored somehow and somewhere in the system. They can't just have this sort of ever-expanding inventory. I think it's quite an important constraint in these sort of games to actually have the player think about how things are stored. Are they vegan? Heavy plant like a fat daffodil. Yes, exactly. And the purpose of a silo is to store resources. So they have multiple resources stored in a silo. Now, my silos are not going to be resource specific. Not exactly true, but the idea is that they have a maximum capacity associated with them. So there's some sort of capacity value. I don't know why my A's are not coming out today. So they have some sort of capacity value. And of course that can be an upgradable thing depending on the nature of the silo. But I did want to introduce something, and it's a throwback to some of the ideas that were kicked around in the last space thing sort of chat where we went through all of these sort of ideas. And it's basically looking at those ideas which has yielded this sort of very basic structure. I am going to have sort of three types of resources though. I'm going to have energy as a resource. I'm going to have things which are sort of tangible, so that's like solid stuff, liquids, that sort of things. And I'm going to also have gases. Because it's space, I think sort of gases are quite important. And when I was sort of doodling out a bit of a technology tree, it seemed fairly obvious. You're going to need oxygen and nitrogen, you're going to need to make air, and then I thought it'd be interesting to deal with sort of the waste byproducts of these things too. So if you've got carbon dioxide, that needs to go somewhere, or it can go and be a resource in some other process, that kind of thing. You'll have to excuse me tonight. This is obviously a shameless non-plug for a horrible drink. I am drinking hardcore Tesco, no added sugar, bitty shandy. It's an OLC favourite, I know. No Vimto tonight, but we'll see. We need more silos. If you don't have a factory in your code, I'm going to be very upset. Now, this isn't web dev. At least it's not Monster. I've been drinking a few Monsters recently. Yes, so we've got quite a few more people here. Yes, you probably noticed I don't sound like my normal self. That is why we've not had any code zones for a couple of weeks. I'm feeling much better, but the symptoms have... Oh, something's going on. Oh, it's Morris. Oh, congrats. Thank you, Morris. Yes, you are fashionably late, Morris. I mean, thank you very much. And standard into there with the thing. I've got my notifications turned on today, so I can actually hear things when they happen, because I can't see the same screen really that you guys can see. So thank you very much for the Prime subscriptions. Every little helps, particularly when I'm gearing up for next year. And next year I've got some exciting stuff happening because I intend to, well, be pretty much back to normal again with the One Lone Coder channel, simply because I've got some paternity leave. Ah, yes, that's a different thing altogether here in the UK. So for the first 6 months of next year, I've got in total 10 weeks off work. So that gives me actually quite a lot of free time to do things. So I'm looking forward to it. A Morris appears precisely when he wants to. Is there a Mentos drink? That sounds disgusting. Mint drinks aren't really a thing. They do exist, but they shouldn't. That said, peppermint cordial, I don't know if you get that anywhere else in the world except the UK. That's actually quite nice. So, getting back to this. The idea is going to have these plants with these basic components, and it's how these components are going to interact, which is what we're going to start having a look at. Now, I envisage that once a player sort of gets going with the game, they're going to have lots of things doing stuff. I want to make it easy for them to build lots of things to worry about. So that means we need to sort of a way of batch processing all of these updates, because factories have an interesting property. Factories are sort of the processing facility in the game system. So all factories, let's draw this out. So a factory, this is my intention, and we may change from these rules. A factory has a set of input resources. Now, that might be 0 or more input resources. You might think, well, how can a factory have something that doesn't actually have any input? How can it produce anything? Well, in that case, it's sort of a factory that is sort of organic, or is a naturally occurring source of resources. So actually, they become quite an important feature. So something with no input resources might be, for example, like a mine. Maybe not a mine. Mines need energy and things, or it could be, speaking of energy, it could be something like a solar panel. That could be a factory type object that takes no input but produces energy at a given sort of tick rate, and that's an important thing too. So the factory is associated with sort of a time to produce an output. And there could be all sorts of different output resources generated, so these need to be flexible in the descriptions. I'm just getting behind the text box there, I'm aware of that. I'll just nudge that down a bit. There we go. Peppermint tea is quite nice. Yeah, I do like peppermint tea. But you don't sort of get, well, you do get sort of spearmint teas and things like that, but you know, sort of a fizzy mint drink doesn't sound very appealing to me. Right, so yes, factories will always produce something unless it's a purely consuming type factory. Now, the only thing I can think of that would do that would be sort of the ultimate waste disposal facility. So maybe you have a waste disposal facility that basically throws garbage into the sun. Something that's a way of actually disposing of resources within the system. And that's the bit that I think we're going to take some time on. And how do we balance all of this to make sure that we don't end up with a huge amount of resources sort of in one part of the system and we're absolutely starved in the other, making the game very difficult to play. Factories should also have expendable fuels or slave labour. Right? Yes, you're right. They should have some sort of cost to operate, but that's going to be one of the input resources. So the main cost for doing anything is energy. Now, in order to produce one unit of one output resource, so let's get a tangible example here. Now, let's say we've got a factory in space that makes bricks. Right? That's obviously not going to happen. But let's say we've got our brick factory. How do we envisage this working? Well, into our brick factory, we're going to need 5 energy and 2 sand. Oh, something went ping. Let me just double check what that was. I have to check these things these days. Wasn't too bad. That's right, Morris. Yeah, it's there's multiple output resources. So in this case, for example, we've got 2 energy, 2 sand. The brick factory might produce 1 brick, and they only ever produce sort of like units of 1 brick and 1 CO2 gas. Right. So we've got our 2 inputs here. We've got our 2 outputs, what we're going to need, and there's a time. So it might take, for example, to produce this output, it takes 30 game seconds in order to do that. So that's kind of the plan that I'm going for. Very, very simple system. Now, we need to store things, of course, and the idea of the plant is that anything within the zone of a plant, which is basically the whole thing, they're connected. So we're not worrying about inter-plant transport networks or anything like that. So just by being sort of in the same place, it assumes that the goods can move around quite freely. I'm not doing sort of the pathfinding and connectivity of all the localized plant stuff. Anno, in space, yes, it is. It's kind of exactly like this. A simplified version indeed. Let's have a look. So the CO2 can go to the farms. Well, exactly. It can go and be sorted something out. It can be used for somewhere else. Wouldn't it make sense to only think about the derivative? 5 energy plus 2 sand per tick gives 1 brick and 1 CO2. Well, that's exactly what I am thinking. So that's how we're going to sort of define what a brick factory is. Because, and you might think, well, why not just define this resource? This brick resource is always created from 5 energy and 2 sand. Well, it might not be. There might be other ways of generating that resource too. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of the process, which is the factory in this case. First time chat from Skurga. Hello. Yes, it's a pen tablet. One I've used. Well, actually, you know, my wife bought me this in probably 2009, something like that. I've had a long time. It's a Wacom Intuos 3. It's got a scroll wheel and it's got a little like LCD display, well, OLED displays on a whole load of assignable buttons. It's a really nice bit of kit. You can right click with, here's the stylus for it. It's got different nibs, it's got a button here, and it's got an eraser, and it can detect the orientation of the pen, so it's quite sophisticated at the time. So yes, it's very much, it is sort of Anno in space, it is that. Yeah, I can't complain at all. I did sort of look after it. When I first got it, I put a protective film over the sort of the main. So it's a big pad, so it's like an A4, and for the Americans here, that's legal letter. A little bit bigger than that. It's an A4 sort of physical size, and it's got chamfered edges, so it's not rough on anything. And I've got it set to sort of almost 1-to-1 with the screen, so it allows me to sort of write quite fluidly with it. Use Wacom as well. OneNote lacks hand tool and zoom isn't much fun to switch to mouse. Yeah, I kind of got used to it, I think. I've been doing this long enough. I did map at some point zoom to sort of the scroll wheel that's built into the tablet, but then I've got sort of 2 hands over here doing things. It's not quite the same. Right, so yes, that's how I'm going to define a process. So we may as well kind of try and formalize that a little bit. So a process is going to have sort of a set of inputs, a set of unit outputs. They don't have to be unit outputs, but I've got a feeling it'll be easier to balance if we keep it that way, and a time. And so if you've starved of energy in your plant, this simply just can't operate. It requires these 5 packets of energy. I did sort of toy with the idea of having energy as sort of this continuous value, and that basically all of your plants look at things in terms of like a resource drain. So if you've got 10 solar panels, then you've got sort of 10 units of energy, and the factory might require 1.3 units just to stay operational. But I kind of felt I didn't want too many more dynamics on this. I'm going to try and just use a very simple engine to handle this all in one hit. Yeah, wait, great. Got a whiteboard in my PC room. No, I used to have a whiteboard, but you're right, it's not as easy to do streaming with a whiteboard. Makodes, okay, no worries, man. All of these streams are uploaded to the JavidX9 Extra channel, which I should point out now we've actually got a few people here. I did actually start with that on the screen. And if you do notice, I put some effort into making sure that they're all color-coded. But the last 2 quite clearly labeled not CodeZone. Quite a few people watching them, but if you're into do-it-yourself wooden hurdy-gurdies, I fully recommend that you watch those videos. Lots of fun. And there'll be another hurdy-gurdy video coming up soon. Because I'm probably going to do one at the weekend, I think, part 3. I didn't realise it would take quite so long to make the hurdy-gurdy. I want to just show the hurdy-gurdy here. So if you've not been following along, it's a full wooden mechanical hurdy-gurdy full of, well, moving parts. It's a lot of fun. And it's very stressful because breaking the wooden parts out of the thing is tense. Oh, well, thank you very much, Matt Codes. Jimmy, you should build a strand beast from a kit. I don't know what that is. Don't know what a strand beast is. Excuse me, I'm going to have some of my no added sugar bitter shandy. So that's a process. So then we wanted to think about storage in our plant. And a storage is like I say, it's going to have a particular type. Is it going to be one of these tangible things, a gas or an energy? And it will then sort of, it doesn't matter what you store in it. So sand, for example, is a resource that's classified as tangible. obviously energy is energy. Now there might be lots of different sources that can generate energy, so we might think of things like radioactive byproducts, solar as we've discussed, futuristic space weirdness that we don't know, something that Ericsson has invented, with lots of different ways of generating energy to put into the system. But we can also sort of change the difficulty of the game by how abundant energy is. And we've already discussed at some length, things like solar panels depends on the proximity to the sun as to how efficiently they can operate. So that brings into another way of thinking about solving this problem. So let's go and have a look at the code. So I started by sort of mentioning that resources are just going to be an ID. And that makes some sense, because the resource could have quite a lot of interesting things attached to it. We've not really broken the surface on it, but it does have a storage type and it's going to have a name. Factories, the same sort of thing. We're going to have all sorts of different factories, but any one given instance of a factory might be unique in some way. So, for example, I think all factories will have an efficiency modifier, and we'll implement efficiency through how we're going to handle the time in the game tick. Efficiency is basically going to increase or decrease how quickly the factory can operate. So if it's 0, then the factory is basically closed. We could find some sort of upgrades or perks which can increase the efficiency quite easily. So I'm creating a modifier. And I think that's where we want to start sort of thinking about how we go and visualize this simulation. A walking automaton. Well, we'll see. We'll get there with the hurdy-gurdy first. Can we hand out this game to politicians when it's done, so they understand what happens when we consume all the resources and blow a lot of CO2 into the environment? We could put a COP20. Was it COP26? That just have a COP26 bend to the whole thing. Storage could be a factory with a cost for keeping things safe. It could be, but it doesn't produce anything. The difficulty there, it breaks the paradigm that we've set for factory, in that it is a factory that only delivers a resource on request. Don't know. I don't know if it fits into the model. Franzich, hello, thank you for the subscription, much appreciated. No, I appreciate that. Subscribe with Amazon Prime. They're often referred to as kinetic sculptures or kinematic sculptures. I don't know. My room is filling up with various bits of junk, all in the name of entertaining the masses for some reason. But maybe I should start selling some of it or give some to charity or something like that. Now we can start looking at these things in a little bit more detail. So a silo, a container for a specific class of resource. Now you kind of understand where I'm coming from. This might make a little bit more sense. So it has a max capacity and it has a count of the total number of resources in. Now the actual stuff that I'm storing in my silo is the identifier for the resource. It shouldn't probably be a size T, it should be a UN32T. Let's change that over. So the identifier for the resource and a quantity of that resource in this silo. And that's because why have I done it like this? I envisaged that one of the things we'll need is a description of the contents of the silo at some point. And I thought it was nice that the contents genuinely only reflect what's there. One option could be that you have a massive dictionary for every single silo that contains every object that the game understands, and you just put a quantity value next to that. Maybe that does simplify things. Maybe that certainly is probably faster than doing an unordered map. But I quite liked this sort of elegance of just keeping it self-contained. And don't forget, my motivations are a little bit different than always the most efficient, optimal way to do things. I think it's a nice way to just sort of for people to see what an unordered map is and how it works. It's basically like a bit of a hash map. But a very simple one. This should actually have a very high performance profile anyway, because you're hashing basically a number. It's the simplest kind of hash you can do. So the first thing I do, if we want to put a resource into the silo, I make sure that I can by looking at how much space I've got left in my silo and making sure that I'm not going to overflow. I also need to make sure that I've got this resource in the silo before, because I don't want to try and increase the resource quota for a given ID if the ID doesn't exist in the map. So I do a quick check. Does this resource actually exist in this silo? If it does, increase its count. If it doesn't, then put the resource in the silo and set it to the value that we're writing. I thought maybe in the future it would be useful to know how much spillage there actually been. So if I wanted to put 15 units of a resource in this silo and the silo can hold 10, then the spillage would be 5. Yeah, so silo is just a storage space in this instance. It's not a weapons system. Withdraw kind of operates in exactly the opposite way. So the first thing is make sure that the resource exists to withdraw. It doesn't sort of give you a problem. If it doesn't, it just returns 0. You didn't remove that particular resource. And again, it makes sure that you can only withdraw the actual amount that's in there. So we do a quick check for that too. But then it occurred to me, how does the sort of system know what the resources are? It's great having this resource ID everywhere. But these resources need to be actually stored somewhere. So I thought, inelegantly to start with, is just a massive big global variable, which is just going to be a vector that stores the descriptions of these resources. So at any point, I can sort of interrogate what a resource actually is. Now I'm going to do, as pointed out, the same thing with factories. Factories probably have sort of all sorts of interesting properties about them that we've not gotten to yet. Particularly when in the simple model, they probably don't, but when you actually start implementing them in a game, they could be having all sorts of other things attached to them just to make them functional in the game. So what graphics should they be displayed with? Is it oriented different, shaded differently? Sort of genuine game mechanics things. With a mouthful. Can factories output factory? That's not a daft question at all. No, they can't, because a factory is not a resource. But to build factories is going to consume resources. Now, I've not really thought of the mechanism to do that yet, but certainly I don't want your player to just build everything whenever they want. The whole point of it, you're expanding your empire, is that you need to sort of make these resources into something useful for yourself. Are we making a game or an extension to Java? No factories. Well, not yet anyway. So what was I actually going to code next? I think we want to start looking at how we represent the sort of the processing side of things. So what was in our factory description was, well, the name of the factory. And I think we also want to have now a sort of vector of the number of resources. Well, the types of resources that we're going to store. So we're going to have a vector here of our resource. And don't forget, this is ultimately just a number, so we could probably actually get rid of the title. The only reason I've wrapped it up is just in case we end up doing something else with it. So we're going to have a vector of resource for our input, but this doesn't include any quantities. No, n input, v input. So what's the best way to go about storing quantities with this thing? Well, I could create a standard pair here, which I think makes sense. So we'd have a pair, which is a resource, and I'm going to go with an int 32. Now, part of me goes, well, what you should be doing here is using size t, and that way you're guaranteeing things. I don't know. I think there might be some fun games to have later on with negative resource requirements. That could start introducing some things that we might need in the game. I don't know. Don't want to rule out anything just yet. When I design data structures like that, I always think how it fits into saving and code updates. You're right. It is sort of at this stage, for this kind of system, you do want to start thinking about the serialization properties of the structures that you're creating. It'd be very disappointing for your player who's played for 5 hours. They can't actually save any of their empire. We won't do serialization today, I don't think, but we'll have a look at just basic structure today. Wouldn't negative resource requirements just be an extra project? Don't know. I don't know how it would work. So factory description, we've got our input, and I think we've got our output as well. So I basically just want to play around with the syntax and see what works nicely. Now, I did specify that really all of the output will always be 1 unit of output per sort of operation that's going on. So that one, for now, there's nothing to specify. Maybe we'll change that later on. Maybe we won't. Don't know. But I'm keeping it simple and visible for now. Maybe to build a pool, you need to remove... Negatives would probably get really weird quickly. I think you're right. That's why I like the opportunity of them. I think there could be some fun and games to be played with that. Remember, this is a game set in space. Right? All things can happen. Along with this, we also said that there was going to be some sort of time requirement for the basic processing. Processing time, we'll default that to 5 seconds. So I'm going to go and now try and create a basic factory description, and we'll go with our brick analogy and see what we can start to sort of create and generate. So let's do that. Factory description. I'm going to create my big horrible global variable for this as well. Vector factory description. Oh, I've got why have I not got the thing? Prod. For some reason I've put these in a strange namespace. Why? Oh, I could have got that. Right. V factory descriptions desks. Oh, something happened. Well, I would pronounce that as Clunal. Greetings. And an anonymous cheerer. Oh, thank you for 1 bit. I like that, an anonymous cheerer. That's a very nice thing. So basic vector, I don't know how that's going to be stored finally in the actual implementation. I imagine it will be something like a singleton or just an object that gets passed around to these things, because people think, oh, you've got all these design patterns that are really bad to have like singletons. In games, it's less important. Sometimes you just want a big fat database of information somewhere that's accessible across your program. And things like the descriptions of the resources are exactly the kind of candidates that you would want in such a structure. With that, I actually need to create some resources too. Now, I did create my big horrible global variable. I'm going to just sort of duplicate that here. Keep it simple. Prod resource descriptions. Now, these are the type of things that you would pull immediately from some external configuration file. I'd like for everything production-wise to be externally configurable, because I think that allows then for some much easier and potentially very funny modifications later on. Right, I've got my 2 factors. Let's construct something to stick in here. So what have I got for my resources? So resource description is name and the basic type. Okay. So we did have, excuse me, first resource, v resource descriptions. Let's just start populating this manually to begin with. So I'll just stick that there, stick that there. So what have we got? We know that we've got energy. And we also know that that is of type where is actually that enum class? Did I throw it up? Storage type. Okay. Storage type energy. Simple enough. We'll stick with our brick analogy for the time being. So we'll have sand, which was a solid, and we'll have bricks, which was an output, which is a solid, and we'll have what was it? Carbon dioxide, which was a gas. Excuse me. Bug alert. Bug alert? Bug alert? Dragonite, explain yourself. I don't see anything obviously that's a bug there. We'll compile it and see what's going wrong. A couple of warnings about size T. Ah, Dragonite. Well, you don't get a refund. don't refund the bit. Well, I do like the attention. No, don't make me laugh. You'll make me start coughing now. I'm really not. It's not COVID. Don't worry about it. I've taken enough tests to last a lifetime. Right. So now we want to define a factory as well. Factory desks. So let's have a look. So what's going to be our first factory is a brick factory. With negative resources, you would need to store them in different places than positive ones. Used to stay. I like that, Russell. All that monster is catching up with you. You think it's the energy drinks, do you? Oh, I didn't expect to be getting up as early this morning. X10 has been sleeping very, very well, but they're teething at this particular moment in time. Very selfishly, I might add. Fancy needing teeth, and well, they kept me awake. They woke up at about 9:30, then they woke up at 11:30, then they woke up at 3, and then I just decided, you know what, I'm going to stay up. No, it's not fun. Although X10 did have the first solid food this evening, so a little milestone there. Right, factory descriptions, that's what we're doing. So now, this is a slightly more complicated nested initializer list, because for my factories, where have I got them? I've got a whole bunch of different properties. I'm just going to copy that for the time being, just so I don't have to keep scrolling up and down the code. So, for the name, we're going to have BrickFactory. That's not very exciting, but I don't really know what a brick factory is actually called. I don't know. It's a brick factory. Then we've got this slightly more interesting construction. So what's actually contained within a brick factory? We've got the name. Now we're going to have to do this sort of elaborate construction here. So we've got a vector of inputs. Now, what is the quantity? So in our one, let's just go and copy that directly. We said it was 5 energy and 2 sand. Right, okay, let's think about this and make sure I get all these in the right place. So the pair exists, and I'm just opening up all of these brackets quite deliberately at the moment just to keep track of things. The resource ID. Now this is interesting because this actually makes it quite difficult to actually see what these things are. But technically the resource ID here I guess would be 0. It's the first element of the vector. But it might be better to find a way to sort of reference these things via strings. That's something to worry about later on. But the ID is 0 and the quantity was 5. So that's our pair. But we've got a whole bunch of these. So that can exist there. That's one of them. The next one was 1 sand, wasn't it? So the ID for sand will be 1 in this case. Was it 1 or 2? It was 2 sand, wasn't it? So that's our structure for the brick factory. Make sure I've got some commas in the right place here. Oh, this is where you get initializer list hell when you start trying to be too clever with stuff like this. So my resource, because resource is actually an awkward structure, isn't it? It is something with a that thing. So, right, okay, this is ugly, but I think. Yes, that's what it's complaining about. So, okay, I think we need a nicer way to sort of index those. Indeed. Rather than doing it that way. Right, so have a quick glance at the thing. Brick Factory's Brickworks. Okay, right, we'll call it Brickworks then. You should know this from Anno. The joys of being you must be shattered. Yeah, I'm less teething for more car accidents. I like that. An enum would be nice for the resource IDs. Yeah, it's nice in your C code, but ultimately all of this is externalized, so it doesn't actually exist. So right now we're handcrafting this just as a way of testing the framework and seeing if the idea is sensible. A bit ugly, I admit, but ultimately I have no intention of handcrafting this in the C program itself. So once it's all sort of automated and algorithmatized, these sort of issues, they do tend to disappear. That's why I'm not really wasting too much time on it. So we've got our factory description of the inputs. We now need to also include the outputs. And in this case, the outputs was 1 brick and 1 carbon dioxide. And we specified precisely that it can only be sort of the one thing. So that's one of ID 2 and ID 3. Oddly, it's going to look like this, 2 and 3. Ugh, that's a bit messy, isn't it? So just to make sure these sort of stay there, like that. So that's our name, our vector of inputs being initialized, our vector of outputs being initialized, and finally a processing time. We said 30 seconds. That's probably far too long to be sort of implemented today. So let's just go with 10 seconds for now. If you're not that familiar with C++, and I know quite a lot of people do actually watch the stuff and aren't super familiar with it, you might be thinking, what the hell has just happened here? But these are it's called nested initializer lists, and it's a feature I abuse in C++, probably for all the wrong reasons. I find it very convenient to create quite complicated data structures populated with data sort of instantly, but they can't be the most readable format imaginable. You can go to town on trying to make all of this look as nice and as possible, but they're good for certain things, not so good for others. But I think there's a few fans on here that are fans. Diego, been a while since you last watched a CodeZone. Well, the last couple have been hurdy-gurdies, so you know, we missed out on some valuable hurdy-gurdy stuff. Oh, hang on, somebody has pinged me in Discord. Okay, good. Somebody on the Discord, in fact, Jacko MZ, was asking specifically of programming languages which use flowcharts as their implementation mechanism. The only one that came to my mind that has any sort of momentum was Scratch, which is obviously aimed at younger people rather than sort of serious developers. If you've got sort of any opinions on that, that might actually be good to throw that out into the Help Each Other chat. Node-RED. I've not heard of Node-RED. See, these it's not something I would ever naturally go looking for, of course, but I imagine these things do exist, and probably at quite a professional level too. But so if you've got any insight, do shout out on that. Right, so I've set up my factory description. Firstly, make sure that actually does compile and doesn't give me a load of interesting problems. Good. So now we want to sort of implement how does the factory actually update itself. Well, the factory object doesn't need to sort of update itself, but I do need a factory here with the efficiency modifier. So this is the the description of the factory. It's the same for all instances of the factory. A specific factory instance is a factory object here. So I'm going to just create one factory to begin with. Factory, and we'll just call that F1 for the time being. Something very, very simple. And F1 the efficiency modifier is going to be normal, and the factory ID is going to be the first element in our factory descriptions vector, which is just going to be 0. So we've established what our factory should be, how it's implemented. So let's go and actually have a look now at sort of doing something with this. Now you might think it's a bit weird I'm doing this in the Pixel game engine, but it's just become so second nature now. And it's also quite easy for doing sort of console stuff with the drawstring. So if we want to sort of display these values, we can do. And the idea is that the actual updating of the factory is somewhat automated. It's going to have several stages. The first one will be gathering resources, then it'll be processing, then it'll be delivering the resources. Now, the gathering side happens on the silos. The processing side is the factory doing its thing. But it does start to raise some interesting problems, which we're probably not going to get around to solving today, which is what happens when you've got several factories competing with silos for resources. How's that going to work? And I think that's where the construct of a plant becomes quite an important thing, because I've said before, all of the factories, it's like one common storage container for your entire plant. So I think the factory sort of picking algorithm needs to be a bit smarter, and we'll need to check all of the silos until it's got the resources that it needs, and once it has done that, then it can signal the factory to actually go ahead and start producing the goods. It will consume them immediately at that point, and then start producing the output. So the concept of work in progress does actually exist here. Dave Churchill is raiding with a party of 28. Hello, yes, thank you. Little Rebel, hey Raiders, yes. First time chat from Push Toy. Oh my gosh. Sounds like a good use case for a stack to me. What for? How do you mean? Do you mean the... I don't know how you mean for a stack for that. You mean for storing sort of all the goods. So you think all of the silos should be sort of commoned together into some data structure that operates for the whole plant? Possibly. Don't know. I think there's a variety of different ways of sort of picking the resources. But I just want to sort of get to that stage. I'm also at the moment, whilst I'm sort of fleshing this out, I'm throwing in these comments just to remind me of what all of these ideas were. So I'm going to assume that to begin with, the factory has no sort of problem sort of getting the resources. We're going to make the factory operate on its own dime. And I've already sort of discovered, actually, I do need an additional modifier in my factory instance. And I'm also not going to do it as float. I'm going to do these as doubles, so we'll change that over. I'm going to need to set or keep track of the current process length, aren't I? Process time elapsed so far. All those who have come to the channel, thank you very much. A bit strange to see people jumping into the Twitch chat at this stage of the game. What would be the punching trees phase of this game? How does one build the first plant? I see what you mean. Sorry, a bit slow there on the uptake. Yes, so we discussed sort of in the previous episode that we would be looking at a vague plot that you've sort of stumbled across this solar system. You've crashed in here. I think it was actually Morris and Gruffler, I think, over a variety of episodes of sort of contributed to this idea. You're being chased and you've sort of landed in this solar system. You have got a handful of basic ships and like a mothership, and so you will give you some starting resources. But rather than punching trees, it's going to be mining asteroids for basic minerals in order to start building the plant equipment that you would need to put on the planets. And then you've also got to think about all the fuel that you're going to require for your ships and that sort of thing. So very quickly you're going to have to start establishing a bit of a base. So for all those that have just joined, my name is JavidX9 and I have a YouTube channel. Some of you may have seen of it, some of it may not. And it's currently not doing anything because, well, I've got some family things going on. But in the new year, that's changing because I've got a lot more time. And I'm going to be trying to get some new videos out. Now, I've got a bit of a project on the go and be interested in your feedback. I'm planning, I'm not committing to it, but I think I'm really keen on building sort of a digital hardware synthesizer. And actually talking about the circuit boards, the electronics, and then writing the software to interact with it and produce lots of interesting sounds. A bit like making our own SID chip for those that know these sort of things. There's a lot to that, and I think it would make some great sort of spin-off videos to be thinking about. Javid gets Minecraft references. I know I'm somewhat a little bit out of touch with reality and being digital. So it's something I'm thinking about doing, mainly because we did it a couple of times way back when I first started on Twitch, where I was doing some PCB design on stream, and it's something that I think is very visual. It's enjoyable. The tools I'm using are all free, and I think there's a lot of educational content to it. But it's also sort of the natural successor to the videos that started the YouTube channel, the Code It Yourself synthesizer stuff. And now that we've got all these fantastic GUIs and graphical tools and all the stuff that's matured over the years, I think it would be great to write a little sort of interface to our own chip and get it playing some pretty funky tunes, and making the design and everything open, so we can get people with a piece of hardware themselves. We'll make it USB compatible or something. So there's a lot of easy things to be doing for people that just want to maybe start with embedded systems. One does not simply build a SID chip. You'll see. We'll see, hardware noisemaker. Yes, indeed. We're probably not going to be etching the PCBs. I will say this: I'm a fan of just buying PCBs. I'm not going to be sat doing the chemistry. I've never done it properly. I've tried briefly at university once, and I just buy the things. Well, I'm a big fan of chiptune too, and so it's kind of where I wanted to go next. And I was always disappointed with my NES implementation of the sound chip on there. I lost momentum. I lost the steam on that project. It burnt me out entirely. But I've kind of had a hankering for it recently. That's the spirit. Prove me wrong. Well, you watch this. You watch this Herbal Dance. You'll see. You'll see. Right, so we've got a couple of minutes left before we sort of finish up for today. So I wanted to sort of try and get a very basic operation of a factory up and running. That became D, didn't it? So basically, I'm going to be sort of accumulating the FE elapsed time, and when it ticks over, that's when it can do some production. So I probably also do need sort of a state. Now, the state can be represented by the processing time, because there's actually 3 states for any given variable, right? So if where's my factory instance? If f1 dot process time elapsed is less than or equal to 0, then we are picking. So that's where we will interrogate plant silos for consumables. Else, if we are excuse me, if we are less than our what was our factory ID? So we want to now go into our factory vector, don't we? Factory descriptions and f1 dot factory ID. If we are less than the processing time required, multiplied, I guess that's actually multiplied by our efficiency modifier. We'll come back to that bit when we've thought it through a bit more. Whilst we're during that phase, then we are processing. Else, no, I'm missing a bracket or something somewhere. Processing elapsed time, what am I missing? What's that complaining about? Probably just the end of this, is it? Have I missed a bracket off the... Oh, else if. So, the final phase is we'll be delivering. Deliver goods. And deliver goods will always automatically, immediately set the processing time. 2, and I'm going to set it to sort of like a negative number. That just means the firstly, if I set this to 0 straight up, hang on, process time elapsed, sorry. If I was to set this just straight to 0, we'd never actually be able to trigger this first state. And it's okay. I mean, people don't get too caught up on the accuracy of these things, because I've no intention of running the update facility for every single processing object every frame. There's no point. Because we're looking at how time elapsed, if I know that factories only do things on the sort of the granularity of a second, I don't need to update my factory any more than once a second in principle, but let's say every half a second, which means I can do batches of factories. So if I end up with 500 factories as part of my simulation, I can on one frame do 10 of them, on the next frame do another 10, then do another 10, and break it up that way, and the end player will see no difference, other than the performance of the game won't be compromised. I think it's a nice way to solve this problem. Yeah, I think the problem is because I design PCBs for a living, for some part of my job. When you get used to sort of 4 and 8 layer designs, you become quite accustomed to it. You don't want to be doing sort of one-sided thing. Captain Ashtar, hello. Yeah, Gruffalo, I found the missing if. Integrate over delta T and check if the resources are enough. This is a Vimto we're drinking. It's not a Vimto tonight, no, for the final time tonight. It is a hardcore Tesco, no added sugar, bitter shandy. This is what real men drink. They're actually very pleasant, and that's why I quite like them. They are 0 sugar, which is good for me. And so, I think that's where we're going to leave it today. So it's a lovely stream again, cooking something interesting I can see. So yes, sorry Captain Ashtar, I've just appeared right at the end of today's stream. Never mind. Thank you, Saucy Thief, for running by. So yes, I'm going to leave it there, and I think we'll pick this up in the next episode, which will be next Tuesday if all goes to plan. In between, though, I do plan on getting a hurdy-gurdy stream in over the weekend. So if you're into extreme speedrunning of hurdy-gurdy construction, then come along for that. Thank you, Alter. No problem. Yes, hopefully my voice will be getting better soon. It's not quite ready yet for making videos. Hurdy-gurdy for the win. Alright, thanks everybody. Take care. Nobody has sort of pinged me to say, hey, can you stream after me? So as a result of that, I have nobody to go and raid. So it says here from CodeZone, hello. Yes. Wouldn't miss hurdy-gurdy for the world. Alright everybody, take care.